7:00 p.m. in Gardner, Kansas. Let's call the Gardner City Council meeting to order. Will you please rise with me and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have no presentations tonight, no public hearings. We do have public comments. So members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. Just understand three ground rules. We have a 5 minutes time limit, not 5 hours.
Go Heath.
No profanity, no personal attacks. Please give your name and address for the record. Go.
Great. My name is Heath Freeman from 602 North Walnut here in Gardner. This is my first time being here without Laura sitting in Matthew's seat, so it's kind of weird to walk up and not see that face. But I'm actually here for two requests for council to consider direction to staff tonight. First is the most important to me personally. I'd like to see staff or council direct staff to begin discussions with some of our government partners, especially the school district, in regards to making the homecoming weekend for football more of a city event, tying in perhaps a parade, a bonfire, ways that I think until now the school district's been leaned upon to do that and done what they can. But I'd like to see the city get more involved. We've had some tremendous success over the past decade or so as a city really hitting some of those quality of life, small town events. Gardner's become amazing at those, the wine and craft, the 4th of July, the Christmas. So I'd like to see that carry over into the homecoming events. Too late, obviously, for 2020, and I do think there could be some minimal costs involved with some of the things we plan. So I'd like to see that part of the 2021 budget process. And if there is a need for a citizen committee that might be part of that, I'd certainly volunteer my time to be. But I think there's a lot of benefit. And one of the things that helps Gardner shine is just the fact that we are a one high school town, and Blaze of Pride can shine all the way through. So I think it would start here. And I'll actually, an opportunity that I get a chance next, go and give the same spiel to the school district, because it is important to me. I think there's a lot to come from that and maintain what we see in the surveys as that small town feel that people move to Gardner for, even though we're still part of JOCO. And it is one of the things that makes us unique is we have that one high school. So that's the first thing I'd like to see council direct to staff and ask them to start that process now so that we have time to do that for 2021. The second one is kind of reactionary from the past week with the fair. It's always fantastic, but I would like to see with next year, the city as a whole have a little bit more assertive education and information process in place. There were a couple Facebook posts, but they were typically day of. I'd like to see that start a little bit further ahead and really engage that, because it brings so many individuals to town, but you do see so many in the area that still aren't aware that we host the fair every year, and talking about how proud we are to host that, incorporating it into our website, incorporating the calendar with links and some of those things that we're not doing now, and using our email channels and our social media platforms to do that. So I just want to come tonight and ask for those two things to be on the notes and to be taken forward if there's an opportunity to do that. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Heath.
My name is Dennis Watson, 670 South Mulberry here in Gardner. And my wife and I are new residents of this town of 2.5 years. I've been a resident of the Johnson County for 40 years, and it's been my pleasure to do business in this town off and on through those years. I just wanted to say we are very pleased to be in this town. And we are excited to come and watch the process of the city. We're also a part of a group that prays for the city on a regular basis, for the operation of the city council and all the administration and employees, especially those first responders. And we're very glad to be a part of this town, and we just say thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Need more public comments like that.
That's what I was thinking.
Anyone else? Seeing no others, I would like.
We got one.
Oh, we have one. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name's Todd Chappell. I'm the resident of 29410 West 153rd Terrace at Gardner Lake. And so you have an item on the agenda tonight. I believe it's item number 7 that will discuss purchase of the tracts of land that are between my existing property and the water. I've been in discussion with Mr. Kramer this afternoon, but also all the way back to June when I began this process to purchase that piece of land. I've gone through all the steps per our original agreement. I guess the item of concern tonight was when I saw the verbiage for what's being brought before you tonight, there was a new Article 4 that talks about annexation of additional property that was added in there that was not part of any of the original discussions, agreements that we've had. That's raised a lot of concerns in our community. Certainly as a property owner, that raised concerns for me as far as full understanding of just this simple purchase if I'm giving up any rights. I believe Mr. Kramer said he would be addressing that with CouncilNet tonight and with legal, so I didn't know if this was the appropriate time to bring that forward, but I do obviously have some significant concerns regarding that, and that's about it. Other than that, I love living in Gardner. I stay active as far as keeping the lake clean and use my tractor to pull the trees out of the dam, so try to stay very active out there to help out, but I am concerned about giving up any rights on that and would ask that that verbiage be removed, at least for my sale.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else? One more. We have one more. Okay, thank you. Good to see you.
Good evening, Jan Pringle, 15271 Lake Road 1. I'm speaking on the exact same issue that he was talking about. And I just want to back up a little bit here. Mr. Mayor, I remember at the Spring Gardner Lake Association General Membership Meeting, you appeared there to talk to us about being friendly and establishing good relationships. But then what do we discover? That suddenly there's something slipped into page 63 of the agenda talking about the residents and the homeowners just in order to buy that little parcel of land and improve their lives and their property, to buy that little parcel of land between their lot in unincorporated Johnson County and the lakeshore, that they're literally being forced to agree to annexation by the city. Now, for something like that to just suddenly appear doesn't look all that friendly, and I'm afraid that relations with the lake have been set back immeasurably. We just happened to notice it, thank goodness, so that we can have our say about this. So I can't think that this is what you could possibly call consent to annexation. Quite frankly, if it's anything, it sounds like extortion. Forcing them to agree to annexation. Now, you already know how the people at the lake feel about annexation. They don't want to be annexed by the city. They already made that clear. Been perfectly happy in unincorporated Johnson County. Not that we don't love the city of Gardner. We do all our shopping here. We spend a lot of money here. We pay taxes here. But we've been very happy in unincorporated Johnson County. They've been very good to us. They've taken care of a lot of problems for us over the years and always dealt with us respectfully and with transparency. And then all of a sudden we see this slip in about, oh, now you're going to be forced to be annexed by the city. I'm almost am out of words. I mean, again, it doesn't look like consent. It's more like extortion. To force them to do that just so they can buy that little slip of land. I mean, you already have the 10-foot easement around the lake. I don't know what more you could possibly want. In addition to the forced annexation, we have to consider that the city administrator receives a bonus to his compensation for annexing land. And it makes the whole idea look incredibly suspect. So if it's annexation you want, I don't think this is the way to go about it. And I know I'm speaking on behalf of very many people at the lake who say, we really think you should abandon this idea. It's very disturbing, and it's going to cause nothing but problems and a huge patchwork of ownership and city and county that make it even worse out there than it already is. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Anyone else? All right. All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is anyone who wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? All right. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Moore, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstentions? Consent agenda passes. There is nothing on the planning and zoning consent agenda, nothing in committee recommendations, and nothing in old business. We move on to new business. New business item number 1, consider approving the payments of the amounts indicated, included in the order for payment to the acquisition of condemnation of real property interest in fee simple for the use of the city of Gardner, Kansas for public use associated with the city's use and operation of the Gardner Municipal Airport. Michael Kramer, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, I think the background is in your packet regarding the action. And so on the item, this is again the acquisition of the Baker Tract located to the east of the Gardner Municipal Airport between the airport and Waverly Road. Previous council action and ordinances authorized the eminent domain proceedings, which the city attorney has followed up on and filed. And so through that process, the court appoints 3 appraisers and they come back with the value, and we're required within 30 days of that to submit the funds as ordered in the award description, and then in the appraiser's award, and then that property becomes our property then for use as described. So a couple notes with that. There's also an appeal process that goes along with that, where either side can appeal that award, and I believe there's a 30-day window to do that as well. So the total valuation, again, for the property based on the appraisers is $500,000. And then there's, I believe, $9,900 in court expenses. And those are primarily, I believe, for the appraiser fees.
Okay, thank you. Michael, do we have any public comments on new business item number 1? Seeing none, questions for Michael from the City Council?
I would real quickly, just like Michael, could you give us kind of the reason why we're doing this, and so that the folks who may be here for the first time know it's not anything we want to do?
So it is for the protection of the airport, and specifically the east-west runway, to protect the runway.
And this is
and
FAA
future
mandated,
use.
correct?
So ultimately this is funded through the FAA. And this is the FAA's highest priority project for our airport. And so therefore we must move forward with this prior to any other project. It does allow for us in the future to move that runway south slightly and be able to expand the buildings at the airport as well.
Thank you.
If I could expand on that just a little bit. So the piece where we're required to obtain that portion to the east of the current east-west runway, that is in the runway protection zone. Right. What the FAA regulations dictate, if it's in the runway protection zone or the RPZ, it's not even sufficient anymore. They've changed the regulations in the past 15 years or something like that to have an easement over that land. You have to actually own it in fee simple, which is what this is part of.
Yep.
And the reason behind it is the reason it's called a runway protection zone is to prevent a landowner from building a structure that could interfere with the approach path of an approaching aircraft.
Michael, I had one question. Do the mineral rights go with this, or do they remain the ownership of the original landowner?
So the only mineral rights that I know of, and Ryan can probably expand on this if necessary, but there was a very old oil and gas lease, and that was part of the condemnation case, and so that will no longer be in effect if that's.
Right, so when you acquire a property in fee simple, you get the mineral rights as well. That, Michael's right, there was an oil and gas lease on that property, like in the 40s. But the way that lease was termed was that it was for a period of like 3 years or until the reserves are spent or oil and gas production expired, which no one can remember oil and gas production on that site for forever. So when we consulted with the title company, they were of the opinion that it had expired, but to be safe, we went ahead and condemned that interest nonetheless.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Eddie? No, sir. Anything else from the rest of the council? No. Okay. With no other discussion, move on to a vote. This is just a straight voice vote. Can I have a motion on new business item number
So
1?
moved.
Second.
Motion, Moore, second, Melton, that we approve the payments of the amounts included in the order for payment for the acquisition by condemnation of real property interest in fee simple for the use of the city of Gardner, Kansas for public use associated with the city's use and operation of the Gardner Municipal Airport. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye. I apologize. I'm for.
Okay, thank you. Any abstentions? Motion carries. New business item number 1 passes. New business item number 2. Consider adopting a resolution determining the intent of the city of Gardner, Kansas to enter into a lease purchase agreement to finance the acquisition of real property, authorizing the solicitation of bids for lease purchase financing, and evidencing the intent to finance the acquisition of land with federally tax exempt debt. I guess that, Michael, you're also doing this presentation.
I'm going to just stand up here and stand in for Matt, but he's obviously available if we have questions. But so essentially, this will allow the finance department to seek lease bids on this and to finance that payment until such time as the airport grant is closed and can receive funds back into that to pay it off.
So stopgap funding or bridge funding, correct?
Yes.
All right. Any questions from the public?
Try and clarify that, Amy.
The only thing I want to clarify is,
I'm sorry.
basically when we get grant proceeds, I'll go back to reimburse for eligible project costs like land acquisition and some of the professional service fees, the interest on the debt service, and the basically cost of issuance. That will just be straight from the airport fund.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Any public comments on new business item number 2? Sorry to jump the gun there. Seeing none, any questions for Michael or Matt? This is housekeeping, I guess, as Laura would call it.
Yes.
All right. Since this is a resolution, it's going to require a roll call vote. We have a motion on new business item number 2.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Moore, second, Winters, that we adopt resolution 2028, a resolution determining the intent of the city of Gardner, Kansas to enter into a lease purchase agreement to finance the acquisition of real property, authorizing the solicitation of bids for lease purchase financing, and evidencing the intent to finance the acquisition of land with federally tax exempt debt. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Moore?
Yes.
Councilman Winters?
Yes.
Councilman Baldwin?
Yes.
Councilman Gavorsic?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Melton?
Yes.
Resolution 2028 passes. New business item number 3, consider adopting an ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $25,250,000 to pay the cost of an expansion to Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant, all pursuant to Charter Ordinance number 12 of the city of Gardner, Kansas. Hey, Matt, how you doing this evening?
Staff recommends adopting an ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $25.25 million to pay the cost of expansion of the treatment plant. These improvements will allow for an additional 3 million gallons a day of water to be treated at the treatment plant, and this will help accommodate the city for future growth and all the current development projects we're working on. And the reason I'm bringing you this authorization tonight is basically for transparency reasons. The contract will follow, I believe, in the next couple of months. Gonz will be bringing that forward. But our budget, that's the next agenda item, basically assumes that you guys will be entering into a contract later this year. And if you remember, this project was originally scheduled for 2021. At council's direction, we moved it up to 2019. And what that's going to do is we're going to have to encumber that entire giant contract this year. And then basically, at end of year accounting, we're going to encumber that, and it's going to look like our water fund goes negative, but it's allowed under Kansas budget law and cash law as long as we have a debt financing plan in place. So that's why I wanted this go before we approve the budget following this item. So what will happen is we'll go negative at the end of this year in the basically water fund. The bond proceeds will come in next year, then end of 2020 we'll have a healthy fund balance. So it's staff's recommendation that you approve this ordinance.
Thank you, Matt. Public comment on new business item number 3. Seeing none, any questions for Matt Wolf or staff?
Matt or Gons, do we ever see the actual number that if we just done the 2 MGD it was still gonna be 17 million or so? Is that correct? Right, we were gonna get an extra 1 for 50%.
Excuse me. I did a update the previous meeting saying that due to the type of clarifier that was selected, we had to go on a 3 million gallon increments. So the original cost for the 2 million gallon day facility was 21 and a half. Due to the going with a different type of clarifier, we have to put a 3 million facility.
Right. Great, thank you. Yeah, even better.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion on new business item number 3.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Baldwin, that we adopt ordinance 2619, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $25,250,000 to pay the cost of an expansion to the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant, all pursuant to Charter Ordinance number 12 of the City of Gardner, Kansas. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Melton?
Yes.
Councilman Moore?
Yes.
Councilman Winters?
Yes.
Councilman Baldwin?
Yes.
Councilman Grabarczyk?
Yes.
Ordinance 2619 passes. Ordinance 2620 is coming up next. Consider adopting an ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2020 budget. You have the floor.
Last year, the City Council adopted the 2019 budget with concurrent conditional adoption of the 2020 budget. Although the city prepared a biennial budget for 2019-2020, Kansas law requires annual budget approval. The proposed 2020 budget was presented to the City Council on June 17th. Then on July 15th, we had the statutorily required budget hearing, which was held in compliance with Kansas statutes. The following is a summary of the 2019-2020 revised budget. The budget is structurally sound, as represented by the adequate reserves in both tax levy funds and utility funds at the end of year 2020. Projected end of year 2020 general fund balance is 23%. Provides continued service for excellence and infrastructure needs for our residents. It balances fiscal stewardship with strategic positioning. Includes a water rate increase of 3.7% in 2020, and there's no mill levy increase. The mill levy is anticipated to be 20.720, the same as 2019.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions or comments from the public on new business item number 4? Seeing none, any questions from the staff, or for the staff from council? All right, I'll entertain a motion on ordinance 2620.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Moore, motion Melton, second Moore, that we adopt ordinance 2620, an ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2020 budget. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Grabarczyk?
Yes.
Councilman Melton?
Yes.
Councilman Moore?
Yes.
Councilman Winters?
Yes.
Councilman Baldwin?
Yes.
Ordinance 2620 passes. New business item number 5, consider adopting a resolution approving the issuance of revenue bonds by the City of Olathe, Kansas to finance facilities located within the corporate limits of the City of Gardner, Kansas. You'll have to explain that one to us, Matt.
The Olathe Medical Center has asked City of Olathe to issue revenue bonds to finance certain healthcare facilities. They have facilities not only in Gardner, Olathe, but I believe Miami County and maybe some other places. And basically just to streamline the project, they want to do it all through the City of Olathe. Keep in mind, this is industrial revenue bonds, so it's not going to be on our books, it's not going to be on Olathe's books, but it's easier for them to basically go through one entity rather than have to deal with multiple entities. So it's staff and bond council's recommendation that you approve the resolution approving the issuance of revenue bonds by the city of Olathe.
Okay, great. Any public comment on new business item number 5? Seeing none, the question I had really quickly was the reason why that we're having to issue approval for bonds that are being issued by Olathe is because the actual construction is taking place within the corporate limits of the city of Gardner.
Exactly.
Correct.
It's being built in the corporate limits of city of Gardner, and by Kansas law, they have to ask us for permission.
Correct. Any other?
So conversely, if we had business interest in Olathe, we could ask them for.
Not us, but if a
If
developer
a developer
based out of
that we have
Gardner.
business interest in. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
Correct. Yeah, I would assume the corollary would be the same. If we had a facility here in Gardner, or if a developer had a city facility here and they wanted to build another one in Olathe, they'd have to ask Olathe's permission. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. With seeing none, I will entertain a motion on new business item number 5.
So moved.
Second?
Motion Melton, second Gregorsek, that we adopt Resolution 2029. Resolution approving the issuance of revenue bonds by the city of Olathe, Kansas to finance facilities located within the corporate limits of the city of Gardner, Kansas. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Baldwin,
Yes.
Councilman Gregorsek,
Yes?
Councilman Melton,
Yes.
Councilman Moore,
Yes.
Councilman Winters,
Yes.
Resolution 2029 passes. New business item number 6, consider approving revisions for the policy of property sales at Gardner Lake, authorizing the city administrator to sign quitclaim deeds for future sales conforming to the policy, and authorize the mayor to sign the declaration of easements, covenants, conditions, and restrictions to be attached to the property sales. Michael Kramer, good evening. I believe you had some clarifications to the council action form.
And so, first off, the reason we worked through and created the document before you for approval, which is the Declaration of Easements, Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, is really to clean up the process and to ensure that those restrictions move forward with the property. Prior to this, they were simply stated, and very simply stated on the quitclaim deeds. We believe that is sufficient to move forward and protect those property interests in the future on the sales that have occurred. But we just wanted to ensure that that those would survive with future property sales. So those restrictions are no fences over 4 feet in height, no structures such as sheds and gazebos higher than 10 feet or with a footprint larger than 120 square feet, 10-foot easement at the water's edge for use by the government employees and fulfilling duties related to the lake. And then based on our conversations last fall at a meeting, I believe November 5th, we also talked about adding a consent to annexation. And that, again, doesn't mean immediate annexation or anything for the property, but what it does mean is that should the city of Gardner move to annex in the future, that the property owner could not oppose that annexation. And that is, it's something that is typically done with other municipalities when they dispose of excess property. It's certainly not something that we've done in the past and or required. Now, the clarification I have in talking with Ryan is Article 4.1 of the covenants and deed restrictions. I believe that was in there to create that consent to annexation, and it's not. That article is dealing strictly with the covenants and restrictions and properties being added to those covenants and restrictions, not annexation to the city of Gardner proper. And so item number 7 under new business, should the city want to, have that as a requirement, there's actually a separate form that's a consent to annexation that we would need to include with those deeds as another exhibit. And so hopefully I've covered that and it makes sense. I don't know if Ryan has anything to add to that.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. So just by way of background, these declaration of covenants, easements, conditions, and restrictions, these are kind of like, for those of you living in subdivisions, covenants and restrictions that cover your subdivision. What happens in those circumstances is the developer will file it, when they develop the first phase, they'll file the covenants and restrictions on the first phase, and then as they add, they'll have a clause like this, like what's in 4.1 here, and they'll say, if I add additional real property to the subdivision, then I, as the developer, have the right to add property to the covenants and restrictions. In this case, that's kind of the model that I used, because we went and we looked at all of the city-owned properties, and it's kind of a mess. I mean, we own the lake. We've sold different parcels out over time. To pay a surveyor to go out there and figure out and prepare legal for what are the city-owned properties, you'd be spending a lot of money. So basically what the concept was is that we would have this master declaration of easements and restrictions, and then as we sold these individual parcels off, we would then add the parcels that we're selling off to the master covenant. And so it is not an annexation, consent to annexation into the city. You are just, through that clause, you're just acknowledging, hey, these covenants, easements, and restrictions apply to my property, and I understand that additional properties may be added as we go down the road. And if you read it in 4.1, it doesn't say anything about annexation into the city. It says may be annexed to and become subject to this declaration. So on its face, that clause doesn't provide or dictate annexation into the city.
And that's why the consent is filed with the Johnson County Register of Deeds and not with the city of Gardner.
Correct.
An annexation of real property into the city would require a consent form to be filed with the city, not with the Register of Deeds. So this has to do with restrictive covenants. It does not have to do with a city annexation, and I think that needed to be made clear, because it is very confusing, because they use the term annexation, and when people hear annexation, they think annexation into a city, but in this case, it was just to annex into the restricted covenant arrangements with all the other properties that were also being held to this agreement. Am I not correct in that statement?
That's it.
Should we reword that then? I mean, change a few. It's on your dime, right?
See, here's the thing: it doesn't say Gardner in it, so you can't annex into something generically. It has to spell out where it has to be annexed to.
And it's actually, it says annexed into
It's annexed
the
into-
declaration.
Add land to a greater mass, it's generally referred to as an annexation.
Correct. And I think that might also explain a lot of the issues that folks in the lake might have had, because I think they thought that this was a sneaky way to get them annexed into the city. That's not the intent here. The intent here is to try to make our covenants consistent.
Can we
So-
open the floor for public comments too?
I
I would like to make sure that we're.
Yeah,
I was
right.
just gonna say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we're not done with the presentation yet. We're going to open it up to full public comment after that, but yes.
Yeah.
If you're.
One thing I might clarify is that, again, we have discussed previously requiring a consent to annexation, and so I did believe that that's what that meant, and I completely misread it. Again, on new business, I am for the actual sales, if you wish to require that, and I'd like to talk about it more before you make that decision, but it would require a completely separate document. So, yeah.
All right, any public comment on new business item number 6?
Sure. Todd Chappell again. And I appreciate, I'm sure the legal advisor, I appreciate the clarification on that, and it's part of record. That's something I want to be clear about. I mean, going into this from the very beginning, I understood there would be restrictions on there. I understood there would be easements and things like that. But I think the wording's poor. Now, I realize that may be boilerplate from some other contracts, and I've worked for the city for 27 years for Overland Park, so I understand this. So, but it's concerning to me as a property owner. Again, it's very vague, the way it's spelled out on that, and it's, so I don't know. I mean, my recommendation would be that it be reworded, but as long as we're clear that that's not me giving up my rights to my existing property. There was discussion about the surveying. I've already paid for that. I've already saved my money to pay for the lot and to pay for a couple grand for surveys and things to be filed with the county. That's all been done. So I would say please consider that as far as your decision making.
Thank you, Todd, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
I have a question.
All right, so yeah, seeing that, we'll go in and get some questions from the council.
Michael, are these restrictions that were listed out as number 5, is that just based off past precedent?
Yeah, so back in 2011, this policy was developed as far as what those restrictions should be and set the sale price of the properties. And those restrictions haven't changed.
So I'm curious, maybe Ryan can educate me here. How do we define an easement when the water's edge moves based off, how high the water table is at that time? Right? I mean, physically on that land, it's moving.
Way to go, Mr. Can of Worms.
I know.
And
I'm
I
just
can
curious
clarify
here.
that. I believe it's given as the normal pool elevation.
Okay, fair.
Man, people think I'm a problem. Look at you go.
Getting back to what Mr. Chappell said about the wording of section 4.1 of the agreement. Is there anything in here that, can we add something to the end of this that says, this section in no way binds the applicant to any formal annexation action on the part of a city?
Isn't the lack of that additional form doing that?
Well, the thing is, that's a clarification though, because that's not said in here, so people are assuming that it does.
Well, I understand that, but we just laid
We
out
just
that the
clarified
assumption
that.
is clarified. So.
I understand, I'm just trying to.
I don't know that you want to add any more to it to confuse future anybody.
I mean, it doesn't say it's annexing to corporate limits of the city of Gardner.
Correct.
It says it's annexed to this declaration. Different, but I understand.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of a way to try to address some of the concerns that were.
I will also say that you're right, that even if we put in here annexed to the city of Gardner, Kansas, it would be ineffectual.
Without a
because
consent.
we weren't following the proper process.
Correct.
statutory Process.
Correct.
So even if that language was in there, it would not have the legal effect without complying with the statutory.
Correct.
process.
You'd have to have that consent form that would have to be filed with the.
They'd have to file the form by someone who's either fee title or reasonable title.
Correct.
It had to be accepted by you all and filed with the city. I mean, you have to go through all those steps. Annexation.
Correct.
Steve, if I may,
Yeah.
reading the Article 4 makes sense. I was looking more at the summary initially, and that's what was confusing.
That's through a lot of people, yes.
So the Article 4 makes more sense to me. It seems clarified.
Okay.
So Ryan, I've got a question and clarification. Were you comparing this document to an HOA set of rules and guidelines for a neighborhood?
I was doing that by analogy.
Absolutely. But with that analogy in mind, that would be based on a new subdivision, is that correct?
I mean, there are circumstances where, and people have done this, where
Absolutely.
you go back in and
With the consent of everybody.
Right,
Right.
you can go back in, but you have to get 100% consent of the property owners. Now, we are not, and this declaration will not be filed as to any property that is not city owned. So we're not going to go back in time and apply these covenants and restrictions to parcels we've already sold.
Yeah, because I received numerous calls about this, and that was one of the questions that those folks were concerned about, that this would be in the rears versus moving forward.
So you're talking about the 95 parcels that have already been sold. Yeah.
Right.
And this declaration will be executed by the mayor. I'm sorry, I've been using my microphone. Ultimately be executed by the mayor today. When you read the whereas clauses, it's forward-looking. So it talks about the property that the city owns presently. It doesn't talk about the land that we've sold in the past.
Okay.
It doesn't purport to apply the covenants and restrictions to those. And for covenants and restrictions to have legal effect, they have to be filed with the Register of Deeds as against the legal description of the property. In this case, we are only going to file these with your second agenda item, which will be the quitclaim.
Okay. The next item that I had, 4.1, and I'll read it and then I'll give you my translation. Such annexation may be effectuated by a written consent filed with the Johnson County Register of Deeds to be bound by this declaration. My translation of that is the landowner would ask to be annexed. Is that correct?
Correct. So when you look at new business item number 7, this is the quitclaim deed along with the entire packet that's attached. So it's got Exhibit A, which is the legal description, B, which is the covenants and restrictions, and C, which is the consent. And by the consent, because the mayor will only execute this once, by the consent, they are agreeing that their property will be bound in perpetuity, meaning the former city-owned property, which is on the lake, will be bound in perpetuity by the covenants and restrictions that identified in Exhibit B.
Thank you. The last item I have is just a clarification. So anybody out there at Gardner Lake currently has no cause for heartache about annexation?
Subject to what Michael said earlier about direction from the governing body, we're not going to unilaterally, we have not heard this direction, unilaterally annex anybody into the city of Gardner who doesn't want to be.
Correct.
The only parcels we're talking about annexation or removing an element of consent are these city parcels that we may sell in the future. But that's a policy decision that you all have to provide us further guidance on.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Jan has a question. You want to come to the microphone real quick, and is that okay, Mayor? I'm sorry.
Certainly. Jan, if you'd like to come forward, we can.
All right, thank you.
We'll make an exception.
I'm trying to understand. So prior conveyances are fine, they're exempt from that, but in the future, we're still talking about the possibility that the city could say, we're not gonna sell you that parcel of land unless you agree to annexation. Isn't
No.
that what you're saying?
Well, that's what Michael was talking about earlier, and that's the policy decision. So there is a possibility that the condition of the sale of city-owned property would be conditioned upon consent to annexation.
Okay.
That was the guidance that was received, if I understand Michael correctly, in the past, but ultimately it's up to this governing body whether they want to condition the annexation like that.
All right, thank you. Well, therein lies the problem.
There is no problem, Jan, because we haven't discussed any of, we're not, personally, I've made instruction of staff to not require annexation of anybody at Gardner Lake.
All right, we got that on record.
Yes, it is on record. I'll be happy to vouch for it.
But that's only good for this current governing body. So elections have consequences, is what I'm saying.
You guys would annex in, you could vote.
Rich.
Yeah, don't think so. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Rich, I'm gonna gavel you down on that, thank you. No, we've had very good and productive discussions with Larry DeMarteau with the Gardner Lake Association. He understands the relationship that we have, the unique relationship that we have between the city and the lake owners. We want to cultivate a better relationship. As Janet said earlier, our intention is to be wholly transparent with any discussions when it comes to annexation, now and in the future. And I believe in personal property rights, and if an individual does not wish to annex, they are not required to annex. You will never see a forcible annexation for anybody anywhere near this city as long as I'm in this chair. And I will have that totally on the record. Any discussion on the intent of the body on this?
I would agree, but I'm only going to be here for another couple of months.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how much stronger I can make that. Anyway, we're still on the agenda item, new business item number 6. So we wish to have a motion on that new business item.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Winter, second Melton, that we approve revisions to the policy for property sales at Gardner Lake, authorizing the city administrator to sign quitclaim deeds for future sales conforming to the policy. Authorize the mayor to sign the declaration of easements, covenants, conditions, and restrictions to be attached to the property sales. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. New business item number 7, consider authorizing the sale of 3 properties at Gardner Lake and authorizing the city administrator to execute said quitclaim deeds. Michael, I believe you've already discussed all
Yeah,
this.
I think we pretty much discussed it, and actually by you authorizing the city administrator to do the sales, I guess this is kind of a moot point, if you will, but basically we do have these 3 property sales. They're pending. They have all completed their surveys and recorded those. I did receive the Sutton survey recorded today. So it's 3 property sales for Chappelle, Kramer, no relation, and Sutton.
Okay, thank you. Any
And-
public comment? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
And I would recommend approving them without any consent to annexation.
Yes, I understand. Any public comment on new business item number 7?
So, just for clarification, so that could possibly be removed from these 3 sales at 4.1? Is that what you were saying?
No.
But that does not, that's consent to annexation to the city of Gardner. It's not in there, correct?
4.1 stays in, because that's consent to annex properties to the declaration of and covenants and easements, not to the city.
Yes. Restricted covenants. Okay. Any discussion on this from the body? Okay. I will entertain a motion on new business item number 7.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Moore, that we authorize the sale of 3 properties at Gardner Lake and authorize the city administrator to execute the quitclaim deeds. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? New business item number 7 passes. Congratulations. All right, council updates. It's the time when we get to hammer council and hammer staff, and staff can hammer council, right? I'm going to start with the captain in the corner over here. Lee, anything?
No, we just finished up another successful fair week. Very normal minor events as usual. Rain, everything went well. I think it was the first time I wasn't there in years I can remember ever, 20-some years. Everybody said everything went well. I want to thank all the other departments for the help, street department, everybody for the sign. Everything went well.
Great, thanks, Lee, appreciate it. City clerk. Matt Wolf. All right, Ryan?
Nothing for me.
Okay. Michael is out talking to the folks in the lobby, so I will pass on him. Larry Powell.
The only thing that we currently have is that we've been working with a couple of the developers on projects, Plaza South and Tuscan Farms and Waverly Plaza. All of those are going through various financial reviews at this particular point in time. So there will be some actions, I am fairly certain, been brought forth to the council in the next couple of meetings concerning each one of those projects. The Tuscan Farms one actually is completed as far as the benefit districts are concerned, and the money has been received. What we're waiting on that particular one is a review of some of the sewer project and some engineering that has to be completed on that particular piece before it can move forward. And then we have, like I said, the other two that we're moving forward with fairly quickly. So that's all I have at this point in time.
All right, yeah, that's a lot of things in the fire. Michael Kramer, do you have anything else that you wanted to add to our discussions?
Yeah, so I push the button. So yeah, now that the lake folks have left, I do expect this week a draft of our spillway plans and specifications, and of course, once we've reviewed those will go to the state for their review. I also have we made a few changes to the sewer plans at the airport to ensure that the actual connection to the restroom could be paid for through our grant process. And so we do expect those to go out this week for advertisement to bids.
That's
as well.
great.
So
I'd stand and applaud, but
I'm excited.
Yeah. Jason Bruce, Parks and Rec.
Just a reminder that we're getting geared up for our annual Gardner Grind Adventure Race a week from Saturday. So I hope to see some of you governing body members out there. I know Dr. Todd will be there, hopefully again. We're going off at 8 a.m. So it's very family friendly. We got 15 plus obstacles, DJ, snacks, shirts. So it's a pretty cool event, and it's really family friendly. So it's a week from Saturday on August 17th.
Great, thanks. Gons Garcia.
Yes, a quick update on the Senate Bill 69. It's alive and well. On Monday, last Monday, the Legislative Coordinating Council agreed to hire London Economics International Boston to conduct the first phase of the electric study for the entire state of Kansas. Gardner is the third largest municipal electric utility. So the cost for the first phase is around $309,000.
And they're expecting us to absorb that.
I don't have all the details, but we're supposed to contribute to the study. I don't know the exact amount, but so on Friday I received a letter from the KCC requesting some information that we need to provide within 7 days.
7 days, huh?
It's the information they're requesting should be fairly simple. They just want one number.
Oh, okay.
To
Well,
get
that's better
started.
than- yeah. Usually it takes the state more than 7 days to bring even one number, so it's like.
But I'll keep you updated on how this rate study grows.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gons. And how are we doing on water usage right now?
It's wet.
Oh, yeah.
This is pretty interesting. Last year, we were about 2.5 million gallons a day with restrictions.
Yep.
Over the weekend, we were up at the same level without restrictions. So it's a combination of weather and rain.
Flushing toilets.
But not that many, I
Fair.
guess.
All right, well, thank you very much, Gons. Appreciate it. City Administrator.
I don't have anything.
Okay. I'll start with Todd Winters this evening for
I get to go first, but I have
updates.
nothing.
You have nothing? All right. Mark Baldwin.
I have nothing.
Randy Gavorsic.
I've got a couple of items, Mayor. First, I enjoyed the fair. Thanks for the men and women that protect us to keep it safe, and it was just a good time. Michael Kramer, I emailed you about curbing and made a suggestion about asphalt. I don't know about the rest of council, but I'm getting numerous calls per week about failing curbing. And again, we're all just worried about what's in front of our house and behind our house, so keep that in perspective. But and it wasn't my idea, but I did pass the idea along as whether we could asphalt these gorges in front of people's driveway thresholds in the meantime. Some of the curbing that I've looked at was scheduled about 3 years ago to be replaced, or at least it was audited about 3 years ago. And as we speak today, it hasn't been replaced. So I wanted to put that on your radar. City Administrator Pruding, is there any way that I can get the notes from the last Planning Commission meeting for the tall grass apartments? I've watched the video, but I'd like to read.
The draft of the notes, they're not officially minutes until they're accepted, of course, at the next planning commission meeting.
Okay.
Such as your minutes are accepted at your meetings, but the draft of those should be finished up, I'm hoping, in the next day or so. They're quite lengthy, and as you know, we usually type, they're pretty much verbatim. So it gets a little hard sometimes when people speak to identify a particular sentence structure or something we said. So we're back, we've done them, we're reviewing them to make sure that what we've written matches as close as possible what we hear. And so they should be available to the city administrator for review the next day or so.
Okay, if I could just get them in 3 or 4 days after that review, that'd be fine. The last item that I had, Divine Mercy came in and got permission to build Father Adams a new house out on the southeast corner. And for some reason, they've moved that house, the rectory, a little to the east, which has cut off the community garden access. And so I was approached by some of my brother Catholics and Knights as to whether there was any opportunity that we could gain access through the parking lot of the softball parking area, which would be from the east of the current garden. Otherwise, we're also looking at options to swing around kind of where the basketball goal is in the south parking lot, swing around the house and back in. So I told them that I'd bring that forth and understand what that entails for us to consider and associated cost.
I think there was a gate there at one time, wasn't there?
Sure.
A gate.
That was,
There was a gate there at one time, was there not?
I don't think so. To the community garden?
There's never been a gate there.
Well-
No, from the east, I thought there was.
No, there's not.
It's always been
It's
a
just
barbed wire
fence.
fence.
Okay.
Yeah.
no, the fence that's on the parking lot is permanent. It's not been gated. Yes, sir, that was really discussed pretty thoroughly at the planning commission meeting, and the planning commission itself made several attempts to make sure that there would be access back to the gardens, and we looked at that request. A request was made at that point in time to go through the park property, and we reviewed that from a liability standpoint as to whether or not the city really wanted to have traffic on and off of a private piece of property through a public parking lot when baseball games are going on and everything else. And it was pretty much decided that the risk of collisions and other issues really made it a little bit iffy to have it there. And they have plenty of room to swing that fence around or swing that drive around the other side. As a matter of fact, if they come off their existing driveway that comes to the west side of that structure, there's actually room just to go right on by the house and go right on down and just curve right back to the original road.
Right.
And that appeared to be the solution at the time the planning commission gave approval for the construction of that facility. And it was originally moved over to make room for that extra garage that they wanted.
Correct.
So that's the reason
Okay.
the house got moved over, was because they wanted to build 2 garages out there.
Okay. Well, I'll follow up with the Knights then at the next meeting. Appreciate you, Larry. That's all I had, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Rich Melton.
So I like Heath's idea about doing something for next year, so if we get it, you know, if everybody agrees, we could have somebody follow up on that, that'd be good, I think. And then, I'd like to say thanks for, you know, everybody doing everything for the parade and the fair this week. It was pretty awesome when I was out. We had lots of people from out of town. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out how we can get the county to actually do more to promote the county fair. I don't see a whole lot. I mean, we talk about how much we see in Gardner, but I just don't see the county promoting it hardly at all. There wasn't a mention of it at the county commission meeting. I mean, the county as a whole to buy in. We always have Gardner schools, you know, and we don't have any other schools come in from any other cities for the bands. And so anyway, but it was a great time. Had a good time on my scooter, and I was glad to see everybody out. It was a lot of fun. So. I guess that's all for tonight. So
Thanks, Rich. Lee Moore.
Two things, real quick. Just wanted to talk about something in terms of what's possible for aviation in particular for the city of Gardner. Not necessarily what's probable or likely, but something that's possible. I spent week before last, I was in Oshkosh, Wisconsin for a week, where they have every year, and this was the 50th year anniversary of this fly-in. People from all over the world fly into Oshkosh, Wisconsin, a little town size, 3 times the size of Gardner, with 66,000 people. But more than 10,000 airplanes will fly in there. People camp, they camp with their airplanes, people drive in with their RVs in camp. Rain or shine, this goes on year after year. This year they had 642,000 people attend. It was run by 5,500 volunteers. They held 1,500 workshops and forums for people that are interested in building airplanes. Let's see. And the most important to the city of Gardner would be the impact, the economic impact for something of that scale was $170 million for this year. And that happens every year for that little town. So I just wanted to, that's my little plug for the bathroom at the airport, and why this little airport thing is important, and because we won't necessarily ever get to that scale because we just don't have the real
Don't be
estate.
bringing us down, man.
Well, I'm just saying.
No limiting thinking here.
Well, we've got some things that are limiting that, like houses and big warehouses and things in neighboring communities. But there are, we do have New Century Airport, which could house something like that. That could help. But, so that was one thing. The other thing is, I've been riding a bicycle a lot for a little fundraiser that's coming up in 54 days. I'm not going to plug my fundraiser, but I have noted in my rides around the city or my spine, I should say, and the rest of my bones and joints have noted this condition of our streets is it's horrific in a lot of places, and even places where we have recently, as in the last 2 to 3 years, done not mill and overlay, but the chip seal. Chip seal is in good condition, but the underlying surface is cracked and uneven and broken, and there's a lot of places like that around town. So to kind of piggyback on what Councilman Gregorczyk mentioned in terms of curbs, it's not just curbs. We've got some serious problems with the streets, and it kind of reminded me that there is going to be a sunset to the existing sales tax that we have. So we need to be thinking about how we're going to budget for the upkeep of these streets going forward.
Correct.
So we need about, I think the number I heard was somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000 a year to properly maintain our streets. So.
And the more streets are built, the more that
The higher that
raise.
goes.
Yep. So, yeah, you're absolutely correct. And a discussion we will probably have happen in the next 6 months to start preparing for that day. I don't want this to go until until 6 months before the sales tax expires. It's like, oh my gosh, we got this big emergency. decisions that are made in reactionary mode are usually not good decisions. So I say we start working on that proactively very soon.
That's all I had.
All right, great, thanks. Kudos to city staff and to the folks at the Fair Association for a tremendous event. They had very good attendance. The weather definitely contributed to that. The parade was special. It was a really neat event. I think we had a record-breaking number of floats this year, which was really good to see. Kudos to Jason Camus, the Gardner Chamber of Commerce, who helped to spearhead a lot of that. Really been working hard to organize that event the last couple of years, and I think his efforts are definitely bearing fruit. That being said, we've got a lot of things happening, a lot of things going on. Check your news articles. We've got some camera crews coming in next week to do some shoots on Gardner, and some other potentially neat opportunities from a media perspective. Danika's, head is spinning. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, but your head is spinning on a whole bunch of different things. We got relationships we're building with the Kansas City Business Journal and with other entities, and of course, we're building a closer relationship with our paper of record too. So I want to thank Danica and her efforts on that, because she's been working really hard on that. That being said, I believe we have 2 executive sessions this evening. We have an executive session to discuss pending litigation. The other one is to discuss matters of attorney. Both of them are to discuss matters of attorney-client privilege. I believe we only need about 10 minutes for the first one. Is that correct, Alan? 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes. And then the other one, we're looking at 45 or 30? 30? Enough to ask questions?
Yeah, you better give us some time.
All right, so we will see if we stick to those numbers. And I'll entertain a motion on the executive session number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Winters, that we recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 to discuss matters related to advice of counsel covered under the attorney-client privilege, beginning at 8:07 p.m., returning to regular session at 8:17 p.m. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? We stand in recess. Entertain a motion to resume regular session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Baldwin, that we resume regular session. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Abstentions? Any abstentions? We're back in regular session. I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
A motion.
Should I announce? I have an
Motion
obsession about
Melton,
guns?
second, stop. Motion Melton, second Baldwin, that we recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 to discuss matters of attorney-client privilege beginning at 8:18 p.m., returning to regular session at 8:48 p.m. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? We stand in recess.
You're gonna get it.
1 minute? We're on. All right. I'll entertain a motion to resume regular session.
Second.
Motion Gorsuch, second Melton, that we resume regular session. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? We are back in regular session. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Moore, that we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? We stand in adjournment.
Yay.